Government spending restored prosperity. The federal budget went from $9 billion in 1939 to $100 billion in 1945. World War II stimulated the economy and ended the Depression, creating jobs and improving living standards. Wages went up, and many Americans saw their wages double from 1939 to 1944. New investments in plants and equipment led to better quality goods and better paying jobs. People moved to go where the jobs were located. Railroads in 1942 made a profit for passenger traffic for the first time in 15 years because of the widespread movement of people during the war and relocations due to new job sites created by the war. Urban America prospered, especially Seattle, Los Angeles, Detroit, and Philadelphia. However, the population movement and growth of cities during the war led to shortages of housing, schools, and public transportation. Due to the shift to wartime production, there was a shortage of consumer goods, and gas and rubber rationing limited travel by automobiles. People spent their increased wages on entertainment, especially theaters, and saved more because of the lack of consumer goods to purchase. The irony was advertising pushed consumption, while the FDR administration advocated conservation of resources to help the war effort. By 1945, 98% of cities had a shortage of single-family homes, 90% a shortage of apartments, and 75% of urban plumbing and electrical facilities were below health and safety standards. Trailer camps, slums on wheels, emerged to deal with the housing shortages, and many apartments utilized the hot bunk system of renting bed space by shifts to deal with the apartment shortages. Economic growth during the war led to dreams of never-ending profits, the end of unemployment problems, and hope of unending consumer goods after the war. Businessmen were brought into the government to speed up the mobilization for the war, and successive business during the war reversed the prestige decline created by the stock market crash and depression. Large businesses profited the most with subsidies, low-interest loans, tax write-offs, and generous profits in government contracts. The largest 100 corporations got 70% of the government contracts, while small businesses were granted fewer government contracts and less access to essential raw materials. While Congress sought to protect small business, the Army and Navy preferred to deal with larger corporations. This became the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower later warned about. According to some historians, the war encouraged bigness in business, agriculture, and academia, since large agribusinesses and larger colleges benefited from government spending, as did large businesses. Since the United States, unlike France or the Soviet Union, never faced a threat of invasion, most Americans who were not in service felt no immediate threat. The government wanted to keep the war in the public mind. Unlike World War I, the FDR administration used less propaganda to generate public support. However, the government needed to encourage less consumption and the purchase of war bonds to cover the costs of the war. Businesses agreed to mobilize their employees to buy bonds, and Hollywood was enlisted to generate war bond sales and to promote the war. The FDR administration found that racial appeals against Japan got a better response than appealing to anti-Nazi sentiment against Germany or German anti-Semitism. Neither appealed to the average American, as the emotional hostility generated against the Japanese, which is part of the reason for the internment of Japanese Americans. The motion picture industry helped government propaganda by appealing to sentimentalism about American home life, exaggerating enemy saboteurs, and glorifying the fighting ability and successes of the American fighting man. Films portrayed the American people as a multi-ethnic, multi-religious democracy united against our foreign foes. Especially in 1942 and 1943, the Office of War Information was reluctant to publicize wartime shortages or deaths in combat to avoid undermining support for the war and the belief in the American and Allied victory. This led to an inherent conflict between the administration's goals of generating support for the war and telling the truth. While the American public did not view the Nazis as an appealing group, the American people were far more united in hating the Japanese, with little encouragement needed from the Roosevelt administration. For the duration of the war, the government and Hollywood promoted the image of America as a happy melting pot of different races, religions, and ethnicities committed to democracy and the war effort.